That's my daughter! The words tore from Grace Mitchell's throat before she could stop them, her hands flying to her mouth as tears blurred her vision. She stared at the photograph in the patient's hand, a simple childhood picture of a little black girl with 2 puff ponytails and a serious expression, and felt her world tilt sideways. Sheikh Tariq Al Hadid looked up from his hospital bed, confusion and shock warring on his face as he clutched the framed photo protectively. What are you talking about? This is my daughter, Amara. She's at home right now. But Grace couldn't hear him over the roaring in her ears, couldn't focus on anything except that face, those eyes, the small birthmark on the child's left cheek that she had kissed 1,000 times before her baby was taken from her 23 years ago. Behind them, the IV stand beeped steadily, oblivious to the impossible moment unfolding in this private hospital room where a routine nursing shift had just shattered 2 lives. To understand how a 47-year-old nurse came to recognize her stolen child in a billionaire's family photo, we need to go back to a sweltering August night in Atlanta in 2002, when Grace was 24 years old, alone, and giving birth to her first child in Mercy General Hospital. She had no partner, no family nearby, just herself and the baby girl she had already named Aaliyah. The delivery was complicated, lasting 16 hours, and Grace was exhausted and medicated when they finally placed her daughter in her arms. She remembered the weight of her, the warmth, the way Aaliyah's tiny fingers wrapped around her thumb. She remembered the birthmark on her left cheek, shaped like a crescent moon. She remembered falling asleep with her baby in the hospital nursery bassinet beside her bed, and she remembered waking up 4 hours later to a nurse telling her there had been a terrible mistake, and her baby had been transferred to another room by accident, but they couldn't find her. The next 72 hours were a nightmare of police reports, hospital investigations, and devastating conclusions. Baby Aaliyah Mitchell had vanished from Mercy General Hospital without a trace. Security footage showed a woman in scrubs wheeling the bassinet down a service corridor at 3 in the morning, but her face was obscured and she disappeared into a blind spot. The hospital claimed it was an abduction. The police investigated but found nothing. No ransom demands came. No body was found. Aaliyah simply ceased to exist. Grace's life collapsed. She spent years searching, posting flyers, checking every database, following every false lead, but as time passed and no answers came, the case went cold. The hospital settled the lawsuit quietly, and Grace was left with nothing but photographs and the unbearable knowledge that somewhere her daughter was alive. She became a nurse herself years later, driven by a need to be in hospitals, to understand the systems that had failed her. She moved from Atlanta to Houston to Phoenix and finally to Dubai, following a job offer that paid well and promised a fresh start. She had been working at Rashid Medical Center for 2 years when she walked into room 417 and saw her daughter's face staring at her from a framed photograph. Sheikh Tariq Al Hadid was 49 years old, a real estate magnate, recovering from a minor heart procedure. Grace had been assigned to his care for the night shift. She had been professional and efficient, barely registering the details of his life, until she glanced at the photograph he was holding while talking on the phone. The little girl in the picture was perhaps 3 or 4 years old, her hair in 2 puff ponytails, her expression serious and sweet, and there on her left cheek was a crescent-shaped birthmark that Grace saw every time she closed her eyes. She had frozen, staring, and when Tariq noticed her attention and smiled, saying that was his daughter Amara, Grace's composure shattered. "That's my daughter," she said, and the world stopped. Tariq's shock mirrored her own. "That's impossible. Amara is my daughter. She was born in Dubai 23 years ago. My wife Layla gave birth to her." Grace's mind was spinning. The timeline matched. Aaliyah would be 23 now, but how could this man's daughter be her stolen child? Unless the abduction had been planned, targeted, part of something larger. Unless someone had stolen babies to order, selling them to wealthy families who didn't ask questions. Where was Amara born? What hospital? Grace's voice shook. Tariq's confusion shifted to defensiveness. Al Noor Hospital in Dubai. My wife had complications and we were told she couldn't carry to term, but then a private doctor arranged for us to adopt through a special program. We were vetted, we paid all the legal fees, everything was legitimate, adopted. Grace stepped closer. "Do you have her birth certificate?" adoption papers, medical records from when she was an infant. Tariq's expression darkened. Why are you asking these questions? Who are you to interrogate me about my daughter? Grace pulled out her phone with shaking hands and scrolled back years to the oldest photos. She found the picture of baby Aaliyah taken in the hospital, just hours old, wrapped in a pink blanket, the crescent birthmark visible on her cheek. She held the phone out to Tariq. This is my daughter, Aaliyah. She was born in Atlanta, Georgia on August 14, 2002. She was stolen from Mercy General Hospital 4 hours after I gave birth to her. I never saw her again. Look at her face. Look at the birthmark. Then look at your daughter's photo and tell me they're not the same child. Tariq took the phone, his hand unsteady. He looked at the image of baby Aaliyah, then at the framed photo of young Amara, then back again. His face drained of color. This can't be, Grace's voice broke. I have been searching for her for 23 years. I never stopped. And now I'm standing in your hospital room looking at her face, and you're telling me she's your daughter. The silence that followed was suffocating. Tariq set the phone down carefully and pressed his hands to his face. When he spoke again, his voice was hollow. The adoption was arranged by a doctor named Samuel Carver. He specialized in international adoptions for high-net-worth families. He told us the birth mother was a young woman who couldn't keep the child and wanted her to have a better life. He said everything was legal, that all the paperwork was in order. We paid him $200,000. Grace felt like she had been punched. $200,000. Someone had stolen her baby and sold her for $200,000 to a family on the other side of the world. Where is this doctor now? Tariq looked up. He died 10 years ago. Car accident in Switzerland. All his records were sealed by privacy laws. Tariq called his wife Layla, who arrived within 30 minutes. Grace sat with them and told her story, every detail, while they listened with growing dread. Layla described how they had struggled to have children, how desperate they had been when Dr. Carver approached them with the possibility of a private adoption. The adoption had been rushed, completed in weeks rather than months. The documentation had been minimal. They had never met the birth mother. Layla had questioned it at the time, but Tariq, desperate for a child, had pushed forward. They brought Amara home when she was 6 weeks old, and from that moment, she had been their daughter in every way that mattered. The thought that she might have been stolen was destroying them in real time. Grace watched these people who had raised her daughter and felt a complicated tangle of emotions, rage at the injustice, grief for the lost years, and a terrible empathy for two people who were also victims. What do we do now? Layla whispered, tears streaming down her face. Grace's answer was immediate. DNA test. We do a DNA test to confirm what I already know in my bones, and then we figure out the rest. They hired lawyers immediately and agreed to a private DNA test. Samples taken from Grace and from Amara, who was told by her parents that there was a medical question that needed to be resolved. Amara Al Hadid was 23 years old, a graduate student studying international law. She flew home immediately, confused and frightened. Grace met her daughter for the first time in 23 years, in the living room of a mansion she could never have afforded to enter. Amara walked in, a beautiful young woman, and Grace had to sit down because her legs wouldn't hold her. The birthmark was still there on Amara's cheek, faded but visible. Amara looked between her parents and this stranger. What's going on? Why did you need me to come home so urgently? Who is this? Over the next hour, they told her everything. And Amara, processing information that contradicted everything she had ever known about herself, went very still and very quiet. So you're saying I was stolen? That I'm not who I think I am? Grace's heart broke. You are exactly who you think you are. You're Amara Al Hadid. You're the daughter of the people who raised you and loved you. But you're also Aaliyah Mitchell, and I'm your biological mother, and I never stopped loving you. The DNA results came back 3 days later and confirmed what everyone already knew. Grace Mitchell and Amara Al Hadid were mother and daughter. The news unleashed a firestorm. The FBI reopened the cold case. Interpol got involved, and the media turned it into a global sensation. The investigation into Dr. Samuel Carver's operation revealed something even more horrifying. He had been part of a network that had abducted or coerced at least 17 babies from vulnerable mothers over a 15-year period, then sold them to wealthy families internationally. Carver's death had ended the operation, but the damage he had done continued to ripple outward. For Amara, the revelation was traumatic in ways that were hard to articulate. She loved her parents, the people who had raised her, but she also felt a pull toward Grace, this woman who had suffered so much, who had never stopped searching. She was angry, grieving, confused about her identity, and terrified of making a choice that would hurt someone she loved. Grace understood. She told Amara over and over that there was no timeline, no pressure, no expectation, that they would instantly have a relationship just because biology said they should. The most important thing was that Amara was alive, safe, loved, and had a future. The Al Hadids were devastated but committed to doing right. Tariq used his resources to fund investigations into other families affected by Carver's network. Layla established a foundation to help families separated by trafficking reconnect and heal. Amara chose to split her time between both families. She spent months getting to know Grace, learning about her mother's life, her family history, and slowly, carefully, they built something that was not quite what either had lost, but was precious nonetheless. She also maintained her relationship with Tariq and Layla, because they were her parents in every way except biology. 2 years after that moment in the hospital room, Grace and Amara sat together in a cafe in Dubai. Amara was finishing her degree, planning a career in international human rights law focused on child trafficking. Grace had written a book about her experience, the proceeds going to organizations that helped families affected by abduction. "You know what the strangest part is?" Amara said. "I look at photos of myself as a child now and I see both families. I see my Baba's smile and I see your eyes. I see the life I lived and the life I might have lived, and I don't know if I'll ever fully reconcile those two versions of myself." Before we wrap this story up, I'd like to thank you for reaching this far. And if you enjoyed this story as much as I think you did, then be sure to show your support by liking and subscribing, so this channel can reach more people like you. Now back to the story. Grace reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. Maybe you're not supposed to reconcile them. Maybe you're just supposed to hold both truths at the same time. You are Aaliyah Mitchell, the daughter I lost and found. And you are Amara Al Hadid, the daughter Tariq and Layla raised and loved. Both of those things are true, and both of those identities are yours. Amara smiled, tears in her eyes. "I'm lucky, in a strange way. I have 2 mothers who love me. Not everyone gets that." Grace smiled back. "I am the lucky one. I got to see your face, again. I got to know the woman you became. I lost 23 years, but I haven't lost you. That's more than I ever thought I would have." The story became a symbol of resilience and the enduring power of a mother's love. It sparked conversations about adoption ethics, about systems that allowed trafficking to happen, about how to protect vulnerable families. Tariq and Layla established a scholarship fund in Amara's name. Grace became an advocate and speaker, working with law enforcement to improve hospital security. And Amara used her experience to fuel her work, determined that other families would not suffer the way hers had. The DNA test that confirmed their relationship had changed everything, but it had not erased the complexity. There was no neat resolution. There was only the ongoing work of building relationships, processing grief, and choosing to move forward with love instead of bitterness. As Grace left a dinner with Tariq and Layla on the anniversary of that day, walking out into the warm Dubai evening, she thought about the photograph that had started everything. A simple picture of a little girl, held by a man in a hospital bed, seen by a nurse who had never stopped searching. The odds of that moment happening were astronomical. She had lost 23 years with her daughter. She would never get those years back. But she had this, the relationship she and Amara were building, the knowledge that her daughter was alive and loved and thriving. She had the truth. Finally, Grace went home, looked at the photo of baby Aaliyah that she still kept on her nightstand, and whispered the same words she had whispered every night for 23 years. "I love you. I never stopped looking for you. I'm so glad you're safe." The difference was that now, those words were not just a prayer into the void. They were a truth that her daughter knew, a connection that had been restored, a love that had survived abduction, continents, and decades. And in the end, that was everything.